faithfully delivering value and exploring the world's best books. Hi there, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today I'll be discussing the book Neuroselling, subtitled How to Quickly Close Deals by Understanding Customers. Do you think you're a persuasive person? What methods do you use to boost your persuasiveness? Feel free to leave comments in the section below and join the discussion with us. Have you ever faced issues like this when trying to persuade others? You go on and on explaining your points, but they're totally unresponsive and even seem impatient. Or you propose a solution, they seem to like it, and you both have a great chat. But when it comes to actually doing it, they say they need to think it over more carefully. Why aren't your arguments getting through? And why, despite having a pleasant exchange, haven't they been convinced? This book points out that persuasion is driven by our primitive brain. Well, the primitive brain is the oldest part of our brain structure, made up of the reptilian brain and limbic system, and it handles our attention and emotions. We often think decisions are based on rational thought, but science shows the primitive brain actually plays a crucial role. Now, if we can't activate the primitive brain, nothing else matters. Based on this insight, the book Neuroselling introduces a neuromarketing model that teaches how to craft messages aligned with the primitive brain's preferences, helping us persuade effectively. I think this feels. There are two American authors. One is Christopher Morin, who holds a bachelor's in marketing, an MBA, a PhD in media and psychology, and specializes in advertising research. Morin, an expert on brain influence, has over 30 years of marketing experience and has led campaigns for major companies. The other author, Patrick Runvoice, is an expert in complex sales and information strategies. He's used brain-based messaging to help clients close billions in deals. Together, they founded a marketing agency called SalesBrain, which uses the neural marketing model to assist businesses with their campaigns. Well-known firms like Siemens and General Electric are among their clients. Happy Wade HPM. The book we're covering today is about 230,000 words long. Now, the authors thoroughly cover the book's value. The authors thoroughly cover the theory behind this neuromarketing model and give step-by-step guides so we can create and deliver effective messages to make language more persuasive. Associate Professor He Jibo from Tsinghua University's Psychology Department believes that this book excellently explains and validates that effectively identifying what customers want and scientifically understanding their decision-making is the key to successful persuasion. Next, I'll break down the main content of this book into two parts for you. First, why does the primitive brain dominate the persuasion process, and how can we quickly activate it? Second, how to design persuasive messages to achieve effective persuasion. Let's start with the first part. Why does the primitive brain dominate the persuasion process, and how can we quickly activate it? To understand this issue, we need to first discuss the two decision-making systems in the brain, the primitive brain and the rational brain. Among these, the primitive brain controls survival-related functions. Internally, it manages basic physiological functions like breathing, heart rate, and sleep. Externally, it handles rapid processing and response to external stimuli, allowing us to avoid risks promptly. For example, when something is thrown at us, we instinctively dodge it. This instruction is sent by the primitive brain, while the rational brain handles higher-level cognitive functions like rational thinking, reading, writing, and complex calculations. This instruction is not so much. We usually think that the rational brain dominates our daily decisions. However, researchers monitoring brain activity have discovered that information we gather from the outside world is first passed to the primitive brain. The neural systems there generate attention in response to stimuli and produce emotional reactions. After that, driven by attention and emotion, neurons in the primitive brain pass the information to the rational brain, which processes it logically, rationalizes it, and ultimately makes the decision. For instance, when you open a web page, you tend to focus on the images first and are more likely to click on links guided by them rather than reading large blocks of text. This is because images activate the primitive brain's attention and emotions, allowing the info to be quickly transmitted to the rational brain for more thorough analysis. However, the primitive brain can't handle large blocks of text. This info fails to activate attention and emotions, so it's ignored and never reaches the rational brain. End quote. Therefore, to achieve effective persuasion, persuasive messages must first impact the primitive brain to have a chance at convincing the rational brain. So, what kind of information can activate the primitive brain and make it pay attention and feel emotions? So, the answer is information that matches the primitive brain's cognitive biases. Cognitive biases are fixed thinking tendencies formed over time in the primitive brain, serving as crucial foundations for its decision making. For example, you order food delivery, and the restaurant tells you it'll take 30 minutes, but it arrives in just 20. Don't you feel pretty happy and decide to give them a good review?
But if they say it'll take 10 minutes and it arrives after 20, don't you get a bit annoyed and want to leave a bad review?
Actually, the waiting time didn't change, but your feelings are totally different because the primitive brain has anchoring bias.
Under this bias, the primitive brain uses the initial information as an anchor point, then unconsciously compares later information to it, creating different feelings that influence our decisions. Cognitive biases are irrational and deviate from reality, but it's precisely because of these biases that we have an opening to activate the primitive brain. There are about 188 known cognitive biases, and the authors have identified 6 primal biases that underpin all others. By targeting these 6 primal biases, we can quickly activate the primitive brain. Now, I'll walk you through the primitive brain's 6 primal cognitive biases and how to stimulate each one. The first primal bias of the primitive brain is survival. The primitive brain's mission is simply to keep us alive. Therefore, it only focuses on information relevant to its own survival, so persuasive messages must have personal relevance. In other words, make the person you're persuading feel this matters to them personally. This requires us to focus on the audience and concentrate on the problems they face when designing persuasive messages. Focusing on the audience means your persuasive message must center around them. For example, imagine you're a car salesperson trying to persuade someone to buy from your company. Don't start by saying, "Our company is the world's top car manufacturer," and then explain your values, mission, and technology. That's all about you, not relevant to them, so their primitive brain isn't interested at all. A better approach is to first ask about their needs. This perfectly matches the primitive brain's self-focused cognitive preference. Beyond focusing on the audience, you also need to zero in on the problems they're facing. This means during persuasion, first remind them of problems they've experienced or want to avoid, then highlight how your solution resolves or bypasses these issues. Sticking with car sales, what do your customers care about most when buying a vehicle? Younger customers might prioritize price, so emphasize deals like 0 down payment, 10-year financing, or limited time 10% discounts. Show them that even with modest income, they can comfortably afford this car. But customers with 2 kids will likely care more about passenger and cargo capacity.
So focus your pitch on seating and storage space. Show how it fits the whole family plus all their gear.
Only by centering persuasion around their problems can you boost its impact on the primitive brain. Next, let's examine the primitive brain's second primal bias, visual dominance. Research confirms vision dominates other senses. When bombarding the brain with multiple stimuli, visual info grabs attention fastest. That's why we should make persuasive messages as visual as possible. Defining with practical alternatives, visualization means replacing text walls with physical objects, videos, or images, but our visual nerves don't process all stimuli. Eye-tracking studies prove most people, regardless of age, gender, or education, only process fragments of info on web pages or labels. So when designing visual persuasion, we must highlight key elements, enlarge crucial text or images, use opaque graphics, or circle vital info. Simply put, The more obvious your key message, the stronger its persuasion. While highlighting key info, we must also consider color usage since it shapes message perception. People have ingrained color associations. Red means excitement, blue implies calmness, and green suggests natural freshness. Choose colors based on persuasion goals, otherwise it might affect effectiveness. For example, Colgate used to design dishwashing soap in yellow or green. Later, they changed the soap's color, and consumers thought the new color looked worse at grease removal than yellow and less refreshing than green, causing a big sales drop. This shows that to achieve effective persuasion, you need to use effective colors. Next, let's look at the primitive brain's third primal bias. The primitive brain has limited cognitive resources and can only handle simple, easy to understand information. Therefore, persuasive messages must be as simple as possible, so the primitive brain uses minimal mental effort to understand. The authors call this stimulation method perceptibility. We can enhance perceptibility through 3 methods. First, use analogies and metaphors. For instance, Einstein explained relativity to the public like this. Have you ever felt that when you're with someone you like, even talking for an hour feels like it passes in an instant? That's the principle of relativity. Second, explain the unknown using the known. In the novel Hometown, Lu Xun mentioned an animal called Cha, describing it as looking like a small dog and being very fierce. Although we've never seen Cha, we're all familiar with small dogs, so we can imagine it based on that. Lastly, remove abstract content and provide concrete evidence. For example, instead of saying many people have used your product, say 2,000 people have used it. That covers perceptibility. Next, let's look at the primitive brain's fourth primal bias, minimal storage. The primitive brain can only retain limited memory, so whether persuasive information makes a deep impression directly affects effectiveness. Therefore, persuasive messages must be concise and memorable. Researchers found that the primitive brain has 2 memory preferences. It remembers the first and last things that happen more easily. Another is that when something triggers a strong emotional response, especially a painful one, the primitive brain is more likely to retain the entire memory. Therefore, the authors suggest keeping persuasion concise and placing key information at the beginning and end. Starting with pain and ending with intense emotion makes it easier to leave a lasting impression. For example, pharmaceutical ads often begin with actors portraying painful symptoms to trigger consumers' painful memories. In Money Later, then they introduce the product with a slogan, helping consumers link symptoms to the solution. After this memory forms, they show actors happily enjoying life post-recovery, reinforcing the product's image. This way, when consumers get sick, their brain immediately recalls an effective medicine, prompting purchase. Next, the fifth primal bias, acceleration. The primitive brain monitors survival and must react instantly to threats. Thus, it's wired for quick decisions, but it only makes fast choices with few clearly distinct options. So, when designing persuasion, limit choices and create contrast between options to help the primitive brain choose faster. 2 contrast strategies. First, when competing, highlight your product's unique benefits that competitors lack. These benefits should be unavailable elsewhere. Live shopping hosts love this tactic. They'll say other platforms offer no freebies, but their stream gives 10 gifts, displaying them prominently. This stark contrast and visual push often triggers instant purchases. Second strategy for non-competitive scenarios. Show someone's pre-product pain versus post-product transformation. TV shopping excels at this. Selling weight loss products show dramatic before-after photos for maximum impact. Finally, the sixth primal bias principle, emotion. It's the brain's communication fuel and key decision driver, faithfully delivering value and exploring the world's finest books.
Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk.
Today, I'll be discussing the book Neuroselling, subtitled How to Quickly Close Deals by Understanding Customers. Do you think you're a persuasive person? What methods do you use to boost your persuasiveness? Feel free to leave comments below and join the discussion with us. Have you ever faced issues like this when trying to persuade others? You go on and on explaining your points, but they're totally unresponsive and even seem impatient. Or you propose a solution, they seem to like it, and you both have a great conversation, but when it comes to actually doing it, they say they need to think it over more carefully. Why aren't your arguments getting through? Why, despite having a pleasant exchange, haven't they been convinced? This book points out that persuasion is driven by our primitive brain. The primitive brain is the oldest part of our brain, made up of the reptilian brain and limbic system, handling our attention and emotions. And we often believe decisions are based on rational thought, but science shows the primitive brain actually plays a crucial role. If we can't activate the primitive brain, nothing else matters. Based on this insight, the book Neuroselling introduces a neuromarketing model that teaches how to craft messages aligned with the primitive brain's preferences, helping us persuade effectively. There are two American authors. One is Christopher Morin, who holds a bachelor's in marketing, an MBA, a PhD in media and psychology, and specializes in advertising research. Morin, an expert on brain influence, has over 30 years of marketing experience and has led campaigns for major companies. The other author, Patrick Renvoice, is an expert in complex sales and information strategies. He's used brain-based messaging to help clients close billions in deals. Together, they founded a marketing agency called SalesBrain, which uses the neuromarketing model to assist businesses with their campaigns.
Well-known firms like Siemens and General Electric are among their clients.
The book we're covering today is about 230,000 words long. The authors thoroughly cover the theory behind this neuromarketing model and give step-by-step guides so we can create and deliver effective messages to make language more persuasive. Pay attention to what they complain about or show disgust or sadness toward in conversations. That's likely their pain point. You can also confirm target audience pain points through online surveys. Now, for example, if selling weight loss products, check forums for high engagement questions about weight loss struggles. Discussions often contain descriptions of weight loss hardships. Great material for uncovering pain points. Check competitor sales platforms. Frequent praise for solved issues and recurring complaints and negative reviews reveal core pain points. After identifying pain points, we move to persuasive message design. Step 2. Differentiate your product proposition, applying contrast creation and memorability techniques. Differentiation means making your product's uniqueness obvious so audiences remember and choose it. For example, MM's famous proposition, melts in your mouth, not in your hands. This slogan originated in the 1940s to 1950. Back then, American chocolate melted easily, creating messy handling issues. MIMS developed melt-resistant chocolate and built their proposition around this feature. So how do you define a product proposition? Follow these steps. First, apply the top principle. T stands for therapeutic, problem solving, meaning your proposition must clearly state what pain point it solves. O stands for originality, making your proposition distinctive to stand out from competitors. P stands for provable, requiring solid evidence to support your claims. Take MM's slogan. Consumers instantly recognize its no-melt uniqueness, TNO compliant, easily provable through live demonstrations. If your product has multiple propositions, showcase only 3 to the audience. Because short-term memory holds just 3 to 5 items, 3 propositions maximize comprehension and recall. The second step, refine slogans to be concise and memorable. When using 3 propositions, repeat a core phrase like saves your time, saves your money, saves your energy. Repeating saves reinforces product impression through consistency. Also make slogans rhyme like cool to the core, refreshing galore, or higher fridges, peerless edges where endings match. Rhyming phrases flow better, boosting information processing and memorability while addressing pain points. After differentiating propositions, we design persuasive messages. Step 3. Showcase benefits. Demonstrating post-purchase gains triggers buying decisions. Here we apply perceptibility and contrast techniques. Present benefits from 3 angles: economic, strategic, and personal. Economic benefits are quantifiable gains like income, savings, or cost reductions.
Always use precise numbers. The primitive brain better perceives tangible value.
Instead of saves money, say, my solution cuts your costs by $58,000 annually. Specific figures are more perceivable and persuasive than vague claims. Strategic benefits involve commercial value like brand recognition, image enhancement, or reputation building. These resist direct economic measurement. For example, calculating how improved car safety boosts sales is difficult. But we can quantify strategic benefits during persuasion. For instance, when selling a new seatbelt, say, this seatbelt boosts safety ratings from 88 to 91, way more concrete than makes driving safer. It better engages the primitive brain. Lastly, personal benefits, psychological or physical gains like stress relief, promotions, hero status, or recognition. And personal benefits are harder to quantify than strategic ones. But if your product delivers tangible help, say saving work hours, calculate exactly how much. 5 minutes? An hour? Spell it out. While presenting benefits, we also need proof. There are 4 common types of evidence. First, testimonials, reviews, or stories from other customers. Being third party, they tap into social proof psychology. Testimonials are the strongest evidence of the 4. Second, product demos, using images or step-by-step showcases to prove value. They let audiences see results firsthand, second only to testimonials. Third, statistical data. Crucially, present data in the audience's most digestible format. Also cite source reliability. It directly impacts persuasion. Fourth, vision, using aspirational beliefs for persuasion. Example, an ad agency designed this for a divorce law firm. A recently divorced woman stands by a luxury car with license plate WASIS, suggesting male ownership. This ad offers women considering divorce a vision. Hire this firm, get more assets. A compelling vision. While it impacts the primitive brain, it's the weakest evidence, best combined with others. That concludes the 3-step persuasive message design. Now using all evidence types together. Step 1, diagnose pain. Step 2, differentiate your proposition. Step 3 is showcasing benefits. And finally, I'll share 3 small tips to boost persuasion effectiveness. The first tip is to visualize all persuasive information as much as possible. Visualized persuasive messages help you capture your audience's attention right from the start. For persuasive messages that can't be visualized and need text expression, the primitive brain's attention must be captured in other ways. We can use the second technique, storytelling. Storytelling is a uniquely human ability and one of the brain's favorite ways to receive information. If the story is well told, the primitive brain will believe it's true. Here, stories aren't just about narrating events like fairy tales or fables. They also mean making the audience feel immersed in the scenario. For example, researchers conducted an experiment where they asked subjects to imagine a bright yellow, juicy lemon in front of them, then close their eyes and imagine the lemon being cut open with the tangy, fresh scent bursting out. Next, researchers had subjects imagine taking a bite, with the sweet and sour lemon juice filling their mouth. At this point, even though subjects weren't actually eating a lemon, their mouths started salivating. You see, a good story can trick the primitive brain, thereby influencing behavior. So how do you tell a good story? You need to create multisensory experiences for the audience: visual, auditory, taste, smell, and kinesthetic senses. The more detailed experiences you create, the better the story's effect. For instance, in the lemon story, researchers used bright yellow to trigger visual experience, tangy, fresh scent for olfactory, and sweet, sour juice for taste, making subjects feel like they'd actually eaten a lemon slice. The third tip to enhance persuasion effectiveness is using you in communication. The word you creates personal relevance, quickly activating the primitive brain's attention. In future persuasion, try replacing phrases like, the new process is 40% faster than the current one, with, using the new process, you'll save 40% of your time. Such a simple change can make your message much more persuasive. At this point, we've covered the main content of neuroselling, and we understand the specific methods for creating and delivering effective persuasive messages. However, during persuasion, we might encounter two issues. What if the person raises objections?
The authors suggest not worrying about objections. They don't mean rejection. Instead, they signal the person is about to decide and wants more information.
In this case, respond confidently by restating your product's features, proposition, and benefits. This creates positive emotions in their primitive brain to counter concerns. So, worries stemming from objections, crucially, never pressure decisions. It creates psychological stress. A better approach, ask what do you think, then wait for their response. If they reply positively, they're likely convinced, because the primitive brain prefers consistency, maintaining aligned attitudes. Once they praise the product, high chance they'll say yes. After positive feedback, ask, what should we do next? Hand them decision control, then wait. For negative responses, treat them as objections. Re-ask, what do you think? Until you get positive feedback that completes effective persuasion. All right, that covers persuasion methods. One final emphasis. When persuading, we're really engaging the primitive brain. Only by consistently targeting its preferences can you become an effective persuader. After this episode, do you have new insights on designing persuasive messages? Feel free to comment below. Okay, that concludes our discussion of neuroselling. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.